The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The latest out of Ukraine is that truckloads of Russian troops have entered Ukraine via a ferry and have taken control of at least one border station. Some have been emailing me and kind of commenting online saying that Russia is not acting in a way that is that crazy. Russia is doing something that, while unpopular to many who are Western influenced, they are really acting to secure their near abroad, the area beyond their borders, immediately beyond their borders. They are arguably increasing some internal political cohesion. And this is not going to have significant consequences for Russia. That what Russia is doing is not nearly as outrageous as what many countries, including the US in some cases, have done. That's certainly one perspective. But when we look at the reality of Russian troops moving into Ukraine's Crimea region by ferry yesterday, after seizing control of a border post on the Ukrainian side of the waterway, this is a situation that is certainly huge levels of aggression from Russia that is violating the sovereignty of Ukraine. I feel weird saying that because often we talk about sovereignty violations jokingly when it comes to people not allowed to have shoulder-mounted RPGs in Alabama. But this is a serious situation.
Yeah, it is an act of aggression. I mean, you're literally stepping over the border and invading another country with armed troops. And I know, well, after the dissolving of the Soviet Union, I mean, a lot of Russians, a lot of very rich Russians and powerful Russians were upset that they lost the Crimean Peninsula. They lost that region because it was called like the Tsar's playground or something. I bet you a lot of them want it back. I don't know if this is just about that, but it's certainly disturbing.
Well, it's interesting because regardless of whether or not it's specifically about that, I said this last week, or maybe I think it was towards the end of last week, that we have a situation here that is feeling very Cold War-like. And what Lewis is talking about is yet another feeling of how this is very Cold War-esque. Now, the one convenient thing about the timing of Russia's foray into Ukraine is that maybe there are still some journalists hanging around from the Olympics in Sochi. And the most convenient timing for invading another country is right after you've held Olympics. So you really cut down on carbon emissions because the journalists don't all have to travel back to the country to cover this. Many of them might already be there. So that at least is an eco-friendly invasion of a neighboring country.
Oh, I guess you found possibly the only positive thing here in this whole mess right there.
Florida is now seeking a triple sentence against Marissa Alexander in this infamous warning shot case. So to get you up to speed on this case, if you've forgotten about it, Marissa Alexander was initially convicted on 3 charges of aggravated assault in 2012 for firing a warning shot, multiple warning shots, in the direction of Rico Gray, her then estranged husband, and his 2 children. Nobody was hurt, and Marissa Alexander's attorneys argued that she had a right to self-defense. Remember, this is Florida. She can stand her ground after her estranged husband physically assaulted and threatened to kill her on the day of the shooting. And in a deposition, Gray did confess to a history of abusing multiple women, not any number, but a number that's higher than I'm comfortable with, including Marissa Alexander. So now we have a situation where the appeals court tossed the conviction. Lewis, do you remember the details of it? It was something about the burden of proving self-defense was incorrectly stated to the jury as being the burden of the defendant rather than the prosecution's burden to prove that she was not acting in self-defense. It was a burden of proof mistake in the jury instructions.
Yeah, it's all just a bunch of crap legal jargon. I think what's going on here is that because of all the bad press surrounding the stand your ground law, I think Florida is trying to make an example of Marissa, and so that they can nail her for this and say, look, stand your ground isn't what you think it is. Look at this case.
Well, many people agree with Lewis. Many legal experts agree with Lewis, which is that after the appeals court tossed that original conviction, which was potentially up to 20 years, there was now there was that was tossed and they had to start over. And now 33-year-old Marissa Alexander, based on the way she is being charged and the penalty that is being sought, could end up in prison for 60 years when she is retried. Judge Daniel originally gave her 3 20-year prison sentences, but ordered that they be served concurrently, meaning a total of 20 years. If convicted a second time in July, there's going to be a new trial. State Attorney Angela Corey, who is the same special prosecutor that was involved in the George Zimmerman case, would ask that they be consecutive sentences, meaning 20, 40, 60 years. And Assistant State Attorney Rich Manti, who also, if you remember, was one of the main players every day on camera prosecuting George Zimmerman, said that the state is simply following sentencing laws seeking 60 years. Critics are saying this is completely outrageous. The advocacy group Free Marissa Now put a statement out saying this is a stunning abuse of power. And what Lewis is not off in characterizing what many think, which is that this is a reaction from prosecutor Angela Corey, state attorney Angela Corey, to kind of push back against the failures in securing a conviction against George Zimmerman. And then there's also the Michael Dunn case where there was no decision made. There was a mistrial on the actual murder charge of the black teenager he killed, but he was found guilty of attempted murder of the other individuals in the vehicle at the time Michael Dunn fired. So George Zimmerman kills Trayvon Martin, issues this completely impossible defense where Trayvon Martin was pinning him down in such a way that would have made it absolutely impossible for Zimmerman to get the gun out of its holster and shoot Trayvon Martin in the way which the physical evidence suggests. Completely impossible. 0 jail time. No jail time at all. Michael Dunn, possibly up to 60 years for killing one person and firing at a bunch of people. And now Marissa Alexander, who fired warning shots to defend herself from her husband, who admittedly had physically abused her, may get 60 years as well. And so many people just furious that this is a desperate attempt from Florida to try to get a conviction somewhere. And coincidentally, it might come against the black woman.
That's it. Considering this is Florida, I have a hard time believing they don't have other opportunities for this. But I think that this is perfect for them because this case has already received so much media attention.
Okay, millions of Yahoo webcam images have been intercepted by GCHQ and their American counterparts, the NSA. And this happened between 2008 and 2010. And there are GCHQ files dated between those years which say that a surveillance program codenamed Optic Nerve collected still images of Yahoo webcam chats in bulk and then saved them to agency databases, regardless of whether the users were suspected of any wrongdoing or were intelligence targets or not. The idea here is bulk collection of these webcam images could then allow you to figure out if potential terrorists or criminals are using different identities online, right? If you can identify the same face through these webcam images, connected to multiple online identities, you could figure out what are the aliases that potential criminals or terrorists are using. Unfortunately, the GCHQ does not have the means to make sure that images of UK or US citizens are collected and stored by the system. The idea is, of course, to track foreign terrorists, but there's no way technically to prevent UK and US citizens from having their photographs, the webcam images, recorded and then stored by GCHQ and NSA. And the documents also chronicle, that have been released by Edward Snowden, how a lot of the images that are being collected, somewhere around 10 or 15%, if I recall correctly, are explicit, meaning they are people engaged in any number of sexual activities through their webcam with the person they're chatting with. So I have to tell you that, is this the ultimate violation of privacy, right? What's the next level from this? If we were to imagine, what would be an even bigger invasion of privacy? Cameras that are in your room and you don't even know they're there. At least this is a camera. You just didn't necessarily know screenshots could be taken of you. The only thing more egregious than this that I can imagine, Lewis, are secret cameras placed by the government in your apartment.
That's it. That's the only thing worse than this, except I guess for someone working for the NSA who's literally looking through your windows or hiding in your house itself. Those would be the only things that are worse than this. This is. I'm not going to say it's unbelievable. I of course I believe this. This is no surprise at all. But it is egregious.
If people don't care about the warrantless collection of webcam still shots when you're presumably just chatting with someone over the internet, then I can't really think of anything that people won't allow the security state to do. Here's an interesting idea from our Reddit. We have a David Pakman Show subreddit, davidpakman.com/Reddit. We'll give you a link to it. And one story that was submitted is an article in Salon from David Diane about how the post office should provide banking services. This is a very, very interesting idea. And there's a white paper from the U.S. Postal Service which suggests implementing postal banking in the United States. What is postal banking? Postal banking is something that exists in many other countries, including Switzerland, Britain, Japan, Germany, Brazil, Israel, South Korea, India, where people can obtain basic banking services at the post office. This could include check cashing. This could include what else? Depositing money, ATM type services. And the idea of this is that there are millions and millions of people in the United States who are unbanked. About 10 million households are unbanked. 24 million additional households are underbanked, meaning they don't necessarily have access to a actual bank. They end up going to places like pawnbrokers, payday loan services, which charge outrageous fees and really do prey on the poor. And this would have a twofold effect. Number one, you're providing much needed banking services to lower income Americans. But number two, it would stabilize the Postal Service. Remember that the Postal Service has this outrageous requirement that is imposed on it and not on any other company that is similar to the post office, where they have to pre-fund retirement accounts for their employees 75 years ahead of time. So when you hear, oh, the post office is going broke, it's not really going broke. It simply is having trouble meeting this outrageous requirement of funding 75 years of retirement programs. So, assuming we can't change that, which we should, postal banking could also provide the post office with much needed stability, and also it would have an identity fraud prevention effect. Recent data breaches at Target have confirmed that we don't necessarily have the best payment security systems in the United States. And one of the big issues with this is that we don't have these chip and PIN credit cards widely distributed. I just got my first chip and PIN credit card. These are standard in many countries around the world. And one of the reasons why we don't necessarily have them yet is that not all retailers and banks are equipped for them yet. The post office, if they were to launch banking services from the get-go, could go directly to chip and PIN services and dramatically increase payment security. I think this is a fantastic idea, and we'll post a link to the article and white paper so people can look at it.
It seems like a good idea. I mean, if it's used in other countries and the model works, I don't see why it couldn't work here.
Well, you know why it wouldn't work? Because UPS and FedEx wouldn't like it. They want market share. They don't want more people going into post offices. Wall Street won't like it. Payday lenders and check cashing places won't like it. A lot of corporate interests that stand to lose money won't like it.
That's true. That's true. Maybe even the big banks wouldn't like it, and we know the power they wield.
Absolutely. Let's take a break. We'll be back after this. So much to talk about today. Great interview coming up today as well.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show is made possible in part by liberalbias.com. Liberalbias.com is your best source for unbiased news because spending $1 trillion on wars is freedom and liberty, but we don't have the money for liberal Big Bird. Doesn't that sound unbiased to you? Go to liberalbias.com to find out more. Today's David Pakman Show member of the day is Leslie Sargent. Leslie Sargent, thank you for being a David Pakman Show member. You can join Leslie right now at davidpakman.com/Reddit, Reddit. Get a free t-shirt with your 1-year membership and be entered in our March 31st drawing, where we will be giving away microphones, the original David Pakman Show vinyl banner, custom t-shirts, and so much stuff. Every member who is in good standing on the morning of March 31st qualifies. Very exciting. davidpakman.com/Reddit, Reddit for information and for the free t-shirt deal. Today in show history, 1 year ago today on the David Pakman Show, we told you the story of a mother who killed her 9-year-old son for having a small penis in Indonesia. Definitely one of the stranger stories that we've covered. 2 years ago today, it's amazing that it's only been 2 years. I feel like this actually happened longer ago. Rush Limbaugh called Sandra Fluke a slut, and all hell broke loose. He lost many advertisers, lost a lot of listeners, and it was quite a hubbub, I'll say. It feels for some reason, Lewis, like it's been more than 2 years since that debacle.
If you had asked me, I probably would have said 4 years. It does seem a lot longer.
3 years ago today, we were visited via Skype during an interview by David Wynn Miller, known for his theories involving the government controlling people through grammar, and he knows how to avoid paying taxes by adding extraneous semicolons, ampersands, and other punctuation to your name, among other techniques. That's an oversimplification, I think, but that's a hell of an interview, Lewis. People really should review that in the archives on YouTube.
Yeah, go check out that interview and then go to his website, David Wynn Miller. It will blow your mind.
And 4 years ago today, Republican legislator Bob Marshall said that disabled children are God's punishment for abortion. At the time, we thought it was like a crazy statement. How could anybody say that? Since then, though, it's actually not really that outside of what we've heard from so many people, including, the body has a way of kind of just shutting the whole thing down if you're raped and everything in between.
We just talked about a female politician weeks ago who said autism was God's punishment for abortion. So it's still going around.
This is really not a good idea if you are so anti-gay that you need to distance yourself from Boy Scouts of America because they're now allowing openly gay troops, and you create your own anti-gay Boy Scout troop. The last thing you want to do is make your salute look completely indistinguishable from the Nazi salute. I'll tell you about this. This is crazy. So John Becker wrote about this, our friend John Becker in the Bolerico Project. Because the Boy Scouts of America now are apparently too pro-gay and that they're not openly discriminating against Boy Scouts, against gay Boy Scouts, a new group formed. It's an alternative to the Boy Scouts that is anti-gay. It's called Trail Life USA. It's the new Christian-based alternative that openly excludes gay kids. And they've established units in 40 different states around the country, and so on and so forth. Now, if they really want to shed the hateful image that they're just there to discriminate against gay people, they should probably rethink the new salute that they've put together, which you can see in this picture here, which is completely indistinguishable from the Nazi salute, holding your arm straight out in front of you at an upward angle. And the group's board chair, John Stemberger, is telling a different story in reacting to the controversy over what appears to be a Nazi salute, saying, "We were horrified when we saw the photo in question. We immediately investigated, and we learned that many Boy Scout troops have a tradition of ending their troop meetings with the boys gathering in a circle and singing the song Taps. The Boy Scouts do this. They start with their hand raised straight into the air with the Scout sign and gradually lower the hand until they get to the end of the song with the hands down at their sides." And John Becker comments, this doesn't really seem to make any sense, that if they're trying to copy the Boy Scout version, they're doing it wrong, and the descriptions that John Becker was able to find don't match up at all with what John Stemberger is telling us. The kids in the photo have only the right hand in use. It's extended at a 45-degree angle, and they also don't seem to be singing, which seems to be kind of like the key part of the whole thing, that they're singing. So, Lewis, I have to tell you, if you want people to think that in spite of leaving the Boy Scouts because they're too pro-gay, that you aren't a hateful group, not having something indistinguishable from the Nazi salute would be a good start.
I think that would be a great start. The funniest thing about this is that if you look at the picture we showed, there's actually a young black child who's also doing the Nazi salute. It's absolutely incredible. I can't imagine that this is an accident.
Religious coach Dave Daubenmire, who we've talked about before, doesn't understand what's so special about homosexuality that people get upset when he criticizes gay people. And he was reminiscing very, very fondly of when we considered homosexuality a mental illness. Listen to this.
No, nobody does that, but they always accuse me of being a gay basher. Folks, I'm going to make this clear. I love the homosexual. I don't love what he does, but I love him the same way that I would love an alcoholic, same way that I would love a drug addict. There was a day when we used to think that some type of behaviors were mental illnesses. It wasn't that long ago we used to think that. We think today that alcoholism is a mental illness, don't we? Probably. Schizophrenia, pedophilia, we think that's a mental illness. Well, there was a day when we used to think that being gay, homosexual was a mental illness.
Yeah, so there's Coach Dave. This is actually completely absurd. This is absurd on so many levels. First of all, the whole remember what we used to do when we didn't really understand stuff isn't a very good argument for why we should still consider homosexuality a mental illness. Remember what we used to do to so-called witches? Should we be reminiscing fondly about that? And what's with the obsession with going back to how things were? Humans have been wrong about so much. Does he want to go back to when we believed that the earth was flat? I think that we should go back to 1986, which is when homosexuality was actually removed from DSM, which is kind of like the manual of mental illnesses and conditions, and ask ourselves, shouldn't religious delusion be what replaces it? That's the question we should be asking.
That is a good question, and unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen. But it does kind of get a little blurry when you're talking about mental illness or just brainwashing from a young age.
There, absolutely, no question about it. And we certainly have to ask those who are raised completely anti-gay, for example, have they been brainwashed? Are they mentally ill if they think that? These are serious questions, Lewis. I hope that Coach Dave Daubenmire is able to explore these in detail. I don't really think we're going to be seeing that segment on his show anytime soon.
No, I think Coach Dave is a lost cause. We'll just have to check up on him every now and again and see what outrageous things he's saying.
There was a day when schizophrenia was considered to be a form of demonic possession, and we know that's not true. So listen to everybody now who tells you that if you're gay, you have these demons inside of you. And I think at some point we'll look back and realize it's a very different situation. I don't know if people like Coach Dave ever will, but I would assume that 5 or 6 generations down from Coach Dave, this very bizarre point of view that he holds will have been aged out, I think is the best way to say it. Brian Kaplan, economist Brian Kaplan, joins me next.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm joined today by Professor Brian Kaplan. He's professor of economics at George Mason University. He's also a blogger for EconLog and author of The Myth of the Rational Voter and Selfish Reasons to Have More Kids. So it's really great to have you. I saw your Reddit Ask Me Anything where you talked about being an advocate for both free immigration and free trade, and you talked about your mostly libertarian economic beliefs. So I'm very interested in both of these, free immigration and free trade. Let's start first with free immigration. Talk about how you developed your rationale for free immigration.
Right. Well, it's really pretty similar to the economic rationale for free trade. So, the usual economist story about free trade is that when people are allowed to trade with anyone they want to on the entire planet, people are as rich as they could possibly be. Right, so overall well-being is as high as it's possibly going to be. And for free migration or free immigration, it's really just the same idea applied to labor. The idea that you have the richest and the best world where anyone can go and take any job anywhere on earth, where they can use their talents to the full extent that they can. So when you just think about what it would be like if you were stuck in Antarctica and how little you could actually accomplish there, and then you realize that most countries in the world are, economically speaking, a lot like Antarctica, where people are not able to make anywhere near full use of their skills. People really do want to move to countries where they can take more advantage of what they know how to do, but it's generally illegal, right? And then, on top of this economic argument, there's the deeper point that, unlike free trade, which we are not that far away from free trade, and most estimates say it's the barriers we have are not doing that much harm. Barriers on migration really are doing enormous harm. They really are trapping billions of people in desperate poverty in the third world when there are perfectly good jobs for them to come over here and do, and they could take care of themselves if they were just allowed to do it.
So let's explore this a little bit, within the context, first just to frame this within the context of the American political landscape. We have two parties, essentially, Democrats and Republicans. Democrats favor more migration mobility than Republicans, but neither favors a completely open system, and Republicans are increasingly interested in actually limiting that migration. So let's talk short term and then longer term.
Sure.
We open the borders, okay? Short term, what happens? In my mind, I think that you will see more movement from people coming from depressed countries to countries where the economy is better. Certainly Canada and the United States, Western European countries. Is that what you would see as happening in the short run? And what would be the immediate economic impacts of such movement?
Yeah, so of course, there are a ton of people who are ready to pack their bags and come as soon as they are allowed to do so. The main reason why it wouldn't be quite as much of a deluge as people think is an important factor in immigration is what's called the diaspora. So generally, a big factor for whether you move to a country is whether there's already a lot of people from your country in that country, whether you have friends and relatives and people who speak your language. So for the U.S. especially, what we should expect at first is a ton of immigration from Latin America, because there are already a lot of Latin Americans here, and they have friends and family that will help them to adjust. So that's what we should expect to see in the short term. Of course, other things that you should expect to see in the short term is lower wages for low-skilled workers, because there are so many low-skilled workers that want to come. You should expect to see a lot more visible poverty. So I don't want to sugarcoat it. If poor people were allowed to come, you would see poverty. The important thing to remember is they're much poorer back in their home countries. It's just that when they're poor there, you don't look at it.
Right. So inequality might be more visible in the United States, but you'll have less of those people that are living on $1 a day in parts of the world that we don't even really think about when we're here in the United States. So let's think about slightly.
And just it's one of the things, just to remember, the most important thing is you should see a very large increase in production. Because right now there are so many people on Earth who are stuck in countries where they really just can't make anywhere near the full use of their talents. And one of the main things that we see when someone comes from poor country to rich country is that their production drastically increases. A Haitian in Miami is about 20 times as productive as a Haitian in Haiti. And so even if they are illiterate and lacking in skills by our standards, still they can accomplish so much more if they're able to go to a country where there are businesses that are ready to channel their energy in a productive way.
So let's explore a little bit of what might start to happen then in the medium and longer term as a reaction to this. My initial instinct is that there may be a sort of balancing effect in that the move away from so many of these areas, like you said, on the Western Hemisphere, from Latin America to North America, in Europe, maybe from Northern Africa into Europe, that we would maybe see very cheap property, low taxes, and favorable conditions in some of the areas that are vacated in the short term. And might we see people start moving in the opposite direction because of the economic opportunities and maybe favorable conditions? Could that happen?
That's a great question. The short answer is yes. Really, we don't need to speculate about this. We can look at Puerto Rico. So Puerto Rico, when it was taken by the United States after the Spanish-American War, they got open borders with the United States. At first, there was only a very small amount of immigration for these diaspora regions that I mentioned. However, first you had a few adventurous Puerto Ricans came and tried their luck, and they did well. And then the next group of slightly less adventurous Puerto Ricans came and tried their luck. Eventually, about half of Puerto Rico left. Then, of course, over time, what you're saying happened, which is that you have all these Puerto Ricans in the United States making much better money than they ever could at home. They send a lot of that money home, and many of them wind up eventually wanting to retire back in their home country, right, or their home territory.
So does this general idea with money mobility and people mobility, does it go in the direction of really eliminating, I don't know if I want to say the need, but does it in some way make obsolete the entire system of countries with borders? Is it in the direction of a one world government or a collective government of sorts?
Yeah, there's no reason for this to be anything like one world government. You can have free trade without having a world government. And it's possible for people to move between borders without having a one world government. So in the 19th century, with a few glaring exceptions for Asian immigrants, the United States had essentially open borders. That didn't mean the United States was going to become part of some United Nations or anything like that. I mean, this is really a policy that any one country can adopt unilaterally. Of course, the larger your country is, the smaller the effects are going to seem to you, right? But nevertheless, it's not the kind of policy that would require anything like a world government. And actually, there are plenty of reasons to be scared of a world government. The main one being, if that one world government starts to get bad, where do you go?
So then my last thing I want to touch on is what in your presentation and discussion of this with both more progressive and conservative Americans, what are the biggest gripes that the American left and American right have with your proposal? And I'm assuming that they're different concerns.
So in many ways, they're not as different as you would think, because the differences between conservatives and progressives in the United States are generally greatly exaggerated. I think of them as being like Catholics and Protestants, where they essentially have the same views, but they manage to take a few minor doctrinal points and blow them all out of proportion in order to be very angry at each other. In general, both conservatives and progressives, they are nationalists. So they think that it's important to focus on Americans first, really with very little attention paid to the consequences for people in other countries. And of course, both conservatives and progressives are social democratic in that they do want to take care of Americans and want government to do it. There's a disagreement about how much, but I'd say it's not nearly as large as people think. But you are right that their complaints do wind up being somewhat different on immigration. Again, so for conservatives, again, they do tend to emphasize the nationalism even more, the idea that we should be taking care of our own first. Right, and to them, I say, look, this is not, so immigration, allowing a person to come here and get a job, it's not charity, it's not foreign aid, it's just letting a person go and get a job from a willing employer. So you'd think that if conservatives care about free market principles at all, that they would want to stand up for the right of a person to get a job. So that is the main reaction I get from conservatives, just thinking, look, this is our country, and we don't know people from other countries anything. And I said, well, it's not a matter of owing them things, just a matter of letting them get a job like anybody else. With progressives, there's a lot of concern about immigration putting a strain on the American welfare state. So the idea is, if we have a lot of poor immigrants come, then this means there are not going to be enough resources to take care of poor people who are already here. To that I say, well, first of all, it seems odd that you'd be so concerned about relatively poor Americans who, by world standards, are generally doing fine, compared to genuinely poor people in the third world who are just looking to get a job. So I think that that is a bit odd. In any case, if that's really is your concern, there's no reason why you couldn't have things like eligibility requirements for new immigrants for welfare, saying like you can't collect welfare until you've been in the country for 10 years or until you paid $100,000 in taxes. Again, to that, progressives tend to freak out about, that's a two-tier system. We have a two-tier system right now. It's just right now, tier number 2 means you aren't even allowed to legally shine shoes, much less collect government money. That has generally been my experience with progressives. Is they're very concerned with what we would think of as poor Americans. Although as to why you'd be more concerned about them than desperately poor people in Haiti literally eating dirt, I don't know.
Yeah, well, it comes down to this idea that the lines between the countries are more than just imaginary lines, right? That's really where a lot of that kind of double standard, or at least shifting views or different views, I think, comes from. It's a fascinating idea. Professor Brian Kaplan, professor of economics at George Mason University. Check out The Myth of the Rational Voter, as well as Selfish Reasons to Have More Kids. Really great to have you on. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Ted Nugent recently described President Obama as a subhuman mongrel, and he went on CNN with Aaron Burnett to talk about that and to explain that it's not at all racist. It's not drawn from racist literature where black people are called mongrels. I would have loved for her to ask him, what about that thing where you were going to be dead or in jail last April? But no questions about that. In any case, this is what he had to say.
Before. I'll tell you, I've been a cop in Lake County, Michigan since 1982 or thereabouts. I conduct federal raids with the DEA and ATF and the U.S. Marshals and the FBI and Texas Rangers and the heroes of law enforcement. And we're rearresting fugitive felons who are let out of their cages after murdering and raping and molesting children, carjacking. We keep going after these guys. The adrenaline is something like you'll never experience. I hope you never have to experience it. But when we're done with these kinds of raids, we get together and our hearts are broken that we have to face these monsters, and we call them mongrels. We call bad people who are destroying our neighborhoods mongrels.
Yeah, he conducts raids with the DEA, ATF, FBI, U.S. Marshals, and Texas Rangers. So PolitiFact looked into this. It appears to be completely bogus. He just made it all up, completely made up stuff from Ted Nugent. So first thing, I've been a cop in Lake County, Michigan since 1982, thereabout. Nugent is a reservist for the county sheriff's office, according to Sheriff Robert Hiltz, but he's never joined them for any raids. Fortunately, we don't have those sorts of problems up here. He also said he conducts raids with the DEA, ATF, U.S. Marshals, FBI, and Texas Rangers. So the ATF responded saying, we are not aware of him conducting any raids with us. The Texas Department of Public Safety was asked, when was it that Ted Nugent joined Texas Rangers on raids? And Press Secretary Tom Vinger said, in regards to your question, that did not occur. That's pretty direct. Then, of course, the DEA was asked to opine about it, and Joe Moses, who's a 22-year veteran special agent with the DEA, said they have neither any record nor recollection of Nugent participating in any of their operations. However, it's possible that he at some point did something with some local group, and for some reason nobody remembers it nor is it recorded anywhere, but that it did happen conceivably. The FBI said they can't confirm nor deny Nugent's participation in any raids. That's funny on so many different levels that the FBI, even when it comes to talking about Ted Nugent, says the standard confirm nor deny language. And when PolitiFact went back to Ted Nugent to ask about all this stuff and said, you know, everybody says they don't know what you're talking about. The only thing that Ted Nugent's assistant wrote, this is Linda Peterson, was, Ted has been active in the following: U.S. Marshal Service, Falcon Fugitive Task Force arrest raids in Texas. That's not really what it sounds like. When they say that he's been active, he went with a film crew on a ride-along with the U.S. Marshals Task Force. That's not really conducting raids with federal law enforcement, is it? That's a bit of a stretch. Lewis, you went on a ride-along with a police detective in Springfield, Massachusetts. To say that you were investigating drug trafficking in Springfield would be a little bit of a stretch.
It would be more than a little bit of a stretch. I can't believe he just lies about this stuff as if no one's going to check up on his claims. It seems like he's just, why would he even make that up? To what end?
It's very bizarre. It's just completely ridiculous. So there it is, Ted Nugent, pants on fire ranking on that lie from PolitiFact. This is very interesting. Chris Miller, who's a viewer of the show, sent me this. To set the stage, Greenpeace co-founder Patrick Moore is now a paid spokesperson for the nuclear industry, and he went on Hannity and denied that humans have had any effect on climate change. This is the video from Hannity a few days ago.
Well, I actually left Greenpeace a long time ago. I was one of the original founders. I was with them for 15 years in the top committee. But by around the mid-'80s, they turned sharply to the political left and began to adopt positions that I could not accept from my scientific background. I have a PhD in ecology, and I am very well versed in all the biology subjects as well as climate change. And I just had to come out and express what I have been studying for the last 25 years, that there is actually no scientific proof. It's not really about evidence so much. It's more about an actual scientific proof that humans are the main cause of the slight warming that has happened in this world over the last 100 years or so. In fact, the world started warming back after the Little Ice Age about 250 years ago. And
so Chris Miller decided to tweet a link to a study saying something completely different, that actually there is a consensus from over 1,300 studies that humans are having an effect on climate on the planet. And he actually got into a back and forth on Twitter with Patrick Moore. This is brilliant. He sent us a screenshot of it. And the response from Patrick Moore is, first, that 97% consensus is fabricated. Okay, that's not true. It's not fabricated. You might think that there was collusion of some kind. There's no evidence of that. But to say that the consensus has been fabricated is completely without evidence. But then he says, second, consensus means nothing in science. Galileo more or less proved that. Of course, Galileo's theories, including his support of heliocentrism, was completely based in observation, right? Which is actually part of the scientific method. And people like Moore will say, listen, we can't really say that humans are having an effect because we can't create an experiment that we can replicate and get specific results. That's fine for certain types of scientific analyses, but he's really cherry picking here. And in fact, I think that if we are to take again the Galileo example, Galileo was fought on heliocentrism in part because religious beliefs said something different. Religious believers said that, wait, no, the Earth is the center of our solar system or of the universe. And some of the opposition to climate change is the same, which is, hey, listen, God wouldn't give us a world that we are so easily able to damage just through industrialization. So in fact, I think Patrick Moore is not only slightly wrong, he's almost proving the point of those who would have been supporters of Galileo.
Yeah, I mean, when he's talking about Galileo, he's not talking about a scientific consensus. He's just talking about the consensus of the people as a whole, not necessarily those who are looking up to the stars.
Exactly. And this is the same as using the colloquial definition of a theory and the scientific definition of a theory. He's talking popular consensus versus scientific.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So it's completely different. There are many people who share his beliefs, but you know what? I'm going to stick with the scientific community on this one.
Very nice work from Chris Miller getting into it with him on Twitter. Let's go to some of your voicemails. 219-2DavidP is our voicemail number.
Yeah, David, I just wanted to see your thoughts on this unusually cold weather we're getting. I know a few years back we had to change the phrase global warming to climate change because it wasn't actually getting warmer. And now I think we should, since it's just been so unusually cold and we're just not seeing any real climate change, we should change the name maybe from climate change to, I don't know, something else to keep the big lie out. Maybe something that doesn't have the word climate or change in it.
Yeah, so this is, just to remind you, this is our San Antonio troll who regularly leaves voicemails asking us to address any number of issues laced with false premises. Of course, we are seeing record numbers of new high and low temperatures. There is, as we just discussed, an incredibly overwhelming scientific consensus. And it's actually become a parody to joke about how when it's cold in winter, there is no climate change. This is a ridiculed position that we hear from outlets like Fox News. Our San Antonio troll apparently not understanding that. Very, very sad. On today's bonus show, we will talk about the Oscar voters, who votes for Oscar winners, a man who eats only pizza for 25 years, and much more, including a convicted man forced to serve a sentence after a clerical error let him walk free after 13 years. DavidPakman.com/membership to access the bonus show, and DavidPakman.com/Reddit, REDDIT, if you would like a free t-shirt with that membership. Talk to you in just a few minutes on the bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.